Assalamu alaikum wa
Assalamu
rahmatullah.
alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, if I'm not mistaken,
Um,
we are back on ShaqAttack this week. Akil, this is our first week doing the show together simultaneously, but from home. Or am I wrong?
I do believe so. I do believe so. I think you were alone last week. Um, I was stuck in the middle of university work and so on.
Yeah.
Um, but it's good to be back, and I'm afraid we've had to say this a few too many times in the last couple of years. Um, but it's been another crazy week.
Hmm.
We thought COVID was the end of the crises which are gripping our globe at the moment. That clearly isn't the case. I think we've just seen anyone who's been following Twitter has been seeing the absolute outrage and the outing of all of these instances of sexual abuse and sexual violence. And I think for the first time, we're seeing the outing and the honest expression about these sorts of problems in our own community. Traditionally, the
Hmm.
Muslim community, the Indian community, you know, awfully good at kind of keeping these things hush, and finally we're getting out and we're starting to speak about these things, and that's what we're going to be covering a bit later on. But I mean, in between all of that, you have Black Lives Matter, you have these massive protests gripping literally every state in the United States. You're having, murders by the murder of Collins Kosa by the SANDF. So it really is crazy times, and I suppose the two of us are here to unpack it.
Yeah, no, I think, um, unfortunately, we only have this hour, and we did have intentions of speaking about the Black Lives Matter movement as well as police brutality in South Africa as well. But we chose to, of course, just focus for this week on sexual assault and lift the silence on this topic, not only for 1 week, but generally hoping to contribute to the lifting of the silence on this matter, whereby mostly women, yes, men as well, but mostly women have been sexually assaulted by other men, older men, in most cases, people that are close to them, family members, friends, at different stages of their lives, and we've come to know this from social media, which often parents say, get off social media, it's bad for you. I really have to disagree. When it's something that is actually exposing the faults in our societies and giving people comfort that they cannot even often receive from those that know them. So we're going to be bringing on Nuran Osman from Ihata Shelter that is in the Western Cape. And Nuran has a background in psychology and is currently the managing director of Ihata Shelter, dealing mostly with sexual assault and violence against women, as well as psychology and addiction related issues as well. And we'll later on be speaking to survivor, that is Shiam Aziz. But for starters, we'll be speaking to Nuran Osman and hopefully getting input from you, the listeners, in our comment section as well. We'd like to hear what you think about this topic, and it's something of serious nature that we have to speak about in our community, not just speak about, but actually do things about, do something about it, because we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to us and tells us that, and the hadith speaks strongly about when we're seeing an injustice, it's not that we merely make the dua. Making the dua is something that is the least of our iman. Our iman begets that we do something about it physically, and hopefully this can form part of that. But we have yet much more to do, inshallah. So without any further ado, we'd like to bring on Nuran Osman from Ihata Shelter in the Western Cape. And with that, we say Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Nuran.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's a great pleasure having you, Nuran. We asked far and wide who would be the best person to speak to on this topic, and alhamdulillah, your name did come to the fore, and we're happy to be now liaising on this, something that you clearly made an impact on in our country. And we don't know much about you, so maybe you can tell us, even if you don't tell us, we'll infer from what we discussed this evening, inshallah, the experience that you've had dealing with sexual assault. But I think first off, just to frame exactly what we mean when we say sexual assault, that's the one thing that a lot of people I'd like to ask, but just to remind listeners and the audiences that this discussion comes off the back of a week of social media activism, where people on Twitter took to Twitter and spoke about their own experiences having been sexually assaulted across the spectrum of what that means. And we'll get to what that means just now. But by doing so, they actually tweeted to say that I was 4 years old, I was 16 years old, I was 18 years old, I was 23 years old. And without going into specific detail of what happened to them, that is the way they came out and said what had happened to them and lifted the silence. So without any further ado now, just to speak about what exactly do we mean when we say sexual assault, and how is it that this comes, what does this term describe, what does it include, what does it exclude, and with that we have Nuran Osman, inshallah.
So Shakil, I think when you called me to talk about the show, something struck me immediately, and that's the fact that I run a shelter for abused women and their children in the Western Cape, and there's only one Muslim shelter in the country, but the problems are huge. And one of the things, the point that struck me when you called to talk about the show was that 80%, maybe even 90% of our clients in the shelter have experienced sexual assault at some point. And even more shocking for me is on intake, we find that more than 80% of our clients were sexually violated as children. So in terms of sexual assault, I think I would include anything from molestation to rape to any kind of forced action against a woman or a man, because we're seeing more and more cases of males who are victims. But usually gender-based violence obviously refers to the violence against women and girl children. But what shocks me also is that a lot of our clients come through as abused women in marriages and claim, and something Muslims are not always comfortable discussing, marital rape. And that's also sexual assault, because it's the whole thing about being available to your husband and all of that. But if you, and one of the cases I used in discussing when we train with ulama is, if you have a husband who is substance using, as we do in the Western Cape, there's a lot of substance using going on, particularly in the communities where I work, and he comes home, you can't argue he's right to your body and all of that because there's nikah. You need to understand that this guy is intoxicated and is going to act in a way that is inappropriate. Forgive me if I rant on and on, but obviously this is my passion.
No, I think I don't think there's any amount of speaking that can be done that'll be enough on this topic, and so no forgiveness needed. But in terms of sexual assault, we understand that it can manifest merely, even online today. We have new forms of sexual assault coming to the fore. People are using their direct messaging or even WhatsApping if they're close to the person, have their number and so on, through sort of stalking behavior, but then insisting for photographs to be sent that are compromising, and failure to do so with consequences and so on. That all forms part of the modern forms of sexual assault that perhaps we didn't consider traditionally. But in terms of your experience, what would you say have most women been through this, or is it something that's still something that is a minority issue? How would you frame it?
In my experience, and I've been working at the shelter for 10 years, I think it's something that's not often spoken about. We don't want to talk about it. It's something that's carpet. And a lot of the violence that takes place is either intimate partner violence or sexual assault by known family members. So you've got girl children, for example, who are forced to kiss their family members. And whether you're forcing a child to kiss an uncle or auntie, it doesn't matter. Children should only show affection to those who they feel safe with. But we're saying, oh, it's an issue of respect. And I think that's where it starts. And that really gets my goat when children are forced. And so when the uncle takes it one step further, then the child does not report the matter because mommy said I'm supposed to kiss, daddy said I'm supposed to sit on his lap. So that's the one problem. In terms of frequency, I'm loath to say that it is far more frequent than we realize. So I don't think I've met more than, in my 10 years of experience at the shelter, I don't think I've met more than 10 women who have not experienced sexual violence or sexual assault or molestation or anything of the kind. So it's literally, for me, it is a direct link, whether I can prove it or not, it's a direct link to gender-based violence, but it starts in childhood. So because she was violated as a child, And she was petrified of telling her mother, because another thing that happens in our households that is quite taboo is we don't talk about sex and sexual issues. So if someone is acting out inappropriately to us, then we can't talk about it, because as one of my clients recently said to me, if I had told my mother, I would have gotten a hiding. So that's another scary thing. And then I also want to say that one of the things that we're seeing is, and I'm by no means using, but one of these perpetrators is that they too are victims of sexual violence. That these boys have been violated in the homes, in the Islamic schools, in the HIF schools, but we can't talk about it because you can't be disrespectful and you can't, bring the religious fraternity into disgrace. But it's there, and I'm dealing with a lot of the clients in having to help for the healing process, because as adults, they can't have normal functional relationships because of what they've experienced through childhood, through adolescence, and what was almost normalized. Like, you almost expect to get violated if you are young going to a religion. But we talk about it because we can't disrespect the leaders and those sorts of things. I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm saying in my experience, I'm seeing a lot through.
So, Nuran, I kind of want to try and debunk a myth to a certain extent, right? So there's this idea. I think first the idea was, oh, I'm Muslim, and so this sort of assault and these sorts of and gender-based violence doesn't happen amongst Muslims, right? And I think slowly that myth is beginning to be debunked, and I think you've spoken to some of that. I think part of what still stays, though, is this idea that because you are of a certain social or socio-economic standing, so for example, you stay in Rondebosch or Warmer Estate, or if you stay in Greenside or Houghton or whatever, Johannesburg, that these things don't happen. That they only happen in poorer communities. They only happen in communities which are riddled with drugs and gangsterism and all of and poverty and all of these other social ills. Is there any truth to that whatsoever, or is it just that perhaps wealthier communities are sometimes more insular and better at hiding these sorts of things?
Okay, it seems like Nuran could not hear us, and we have to repeat that when we have her back with us. And yeah, Nuran, you're back now, hopefully fine now. Akil, please repeat that. I think Nuran just
So,
purposes.
Nuran, I'm not sure if you managed to get that question, but I think the crux of it was, I think there's this concept that firstly, that initially that sexual violence and gender-based violence didn't happen in Muslim communities, and that's beginning to be debunked. And I think now it's been this shift to say that it doesn't happen in my community because my community is socioeconomically well off. How can this be happening in wealthy communities in Greenside and Houghton and Rondebosch and Walnut State and wherever else? Is there truth to that?
Akil, I think it happens in every community regardless, because it's a social ill. It has nothing to do with how much money you have or have. It has nothing to do with your status or your level of education. It's the beliefs that we hold that say things like marital rape does not happen. It's the beliefs that we hold that say that men have a degree over women, men have rights over women, men get to decide. But it's also about women. And one of the things we struggle with in the shelter, which is quite an odd nuance, I think, is that the women on women violence. So that women degrade other women, that women speak ill of other women and their bodies and their size and all of those sorts of things. And so I think those things need to be addressed in households. One of the things that concern me about our households is the inequalities that we create early on. So, for example, moms will say to their daughters, your brother is tired from a long day at school. Can you prepare, tea and a sandwich? But the daughter's also been at school all day. Or we don't want our son is laying on the sofa playing video games while our daughters are looking after younger siblings. And then that whole notion of not wanting our sons to engage what is traditionally feminine tasks. Now it starts there because, it's the whole thing about, always preparing our sons for success, but we're preparing our daughters to be good wives. And what does a good wife mean? It means that you've got to be subservient. It means you don't answer back. It means that your body does not even belong to you, because we are socialized to believe that when you are in the household, then your father has right over you. I don't dispute that, but to what extent? And then when you get married, your husband owns your body and he can come to you as he pleases, and people will use Quran to justify this. And so it's just, do what you want with the girl children, but take good care of the boy children. Do what you want with the girl children, the boy children will carry the family name. And it's those social constructs that I think need questioning, because when girl children start believing those sorts of things, they feel unable to stand up for themselves. Also, you won't get a good husband because you're so cheeky. You won't get a good husband because you're not nice to the uncles. You're not bringing their tea and those sorts of things. And so for me, it starts there. It starts with the inequality in homes, and then it goes on and goes on and goes on.
So where do we draw the line in saying enough is enough? To what extent can we actually speak to? I'm sure you've done it already. Changing the structures in a way that, for example, nursery school kids are taught at that level already, or parents are trained to rear their kids. I don't know how many people do parenting lessons. People go for marriage classes, but when the kids come, there's no real, dissemination of knowledge in that regard. And if there is, then it's obviously biased. But where do we begin to change things? Because these moments are not going to come often where people feel open enough to speak up. But ultimately, we need to use them to actually propel us to the next step, which is what next. Here.
It seems that we can't hear Naran. We'll try and.
Yeah, just bear with us, please, regarding the network. Naran.
All right, Naran, we can. I think we can hear you. Do you mind continuing with Shakil's question?
No, we can't hear you.
We still can't hear you. Okay, so we're gonna try that again. We're having some technical difficulties. Shaqs, I think that a big part of this question are societal structures, the way we brought up, that sort of thing. But I think that there are a lot of conversations which are missing amongst men, right? Because I think ultimately, and this is in all cases, and we know that, but in the overriding majority of cases, it's a male problem. And I'm curious, what do you think has been wrong with is it the way that we're socialized? Is it what we're taught? Is it what's happening at schools? I went to an all boys, typical Model C rugby, like one of the posh schools, which to a certain degree entrenches a certain amount of patriarchy, because it's all about how big and buff and muscular you are. It's about this kind of like testosterone measuring competition, and that is a part of the problem. But what are we doing wrong?
Yeah, no, I think that we have to look at who do people listen to ultimately, and from a young age, if that's teachers and if that's the school system or school culture that informs your behavior in life, then that needs to change at one level. But then at least from our example, if we're attending mosque every week, once a week, and we're also attending madrasa after school or whatever, then those are places that the issue could be addressed, and not addressed in a okay, here's one khutbah, it's over, one lesson, it's over, but in a way that could actually entrench the opposite of what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
And that's not happening. So If you ask me what makes an abuser or an assaulter or a molester or someone that has no understanding of the limits, I don't know because we don't speak about it. I can't tell you if I know people that do it or that don't because we don't know. Until somebody sometimes on Twitter, somebody will say so and so did this to me. Um, up until that time, we would never know who it is, and we'll never then be able to unpack why they did what they did because we don't know who the people are. Essentially, as resigning as that sounds.
I think you're right, but I think we're starting to kind of call these things out. We have Naran back on the line, and I think Shaq's we'll pick this part of the discussion up a little bit later. Naran, I'm not sure. Do you? I think firstly, let's do a bit of a hearing, an audio test. Can you hear us? And hopefully we can hear you. Still no sound. Perhaps maybe check if the mic is on.
Yeah,
All
maybe
right.
it's muted, but or just check whether you've given permission to your laptop. But nonetheless, that tolerably spoken about.
Naran?
And where, for example, you don't necessarily when we now become the uncles of the situation, we don't have the same socio-cultural expectations that the kid has to greet you in a certain way to be respectful and so on. We don't have those things any longer, at least not among our age group, I think. So things can change from here on out. But that doesn't mean that our colleagues and our own friends and mates are not doing these things, even secretively or in a way that it's described. So
But look, I agree with you. I agree with you to some extent. I think that hopefully this will be the start of the change, and that we can start addressing the kind of cultural issues. But if we're being honest, I think we're seeing some of those changes in our community already. If I have to look at young people our age who are married, I think that a lot of those expectations that only a man, only a woman in the household cooks, only a woman in the household does household chores and that sort of thing. I think that some of those expectations have kind of not entirely been eradicated, but have shifted, right? In many households, a lot of the duties are shared, sometimes often imperfectly. Often the woman still takes more of a role, but it hasn't done anything to change the kind of gender-based violence which we're seeing. It hasn't done anything to change sexual assault and sexual violence, and I think we really need to sit down and try and question, why that is. Hopefully we can get Naran back into this conversation. Naran?
Are you with us, Naran? Yeah, no, I think that you have a point there when you say that although gender roles may be changing in the home, maybe both partners work and they come home to, like, especially young couples who are not living with families, they both come home from work and they both have to contribute to ensuring that there are meals served and so on, and that certain things are done. Of course, in balanced way, as you said, we're not exactly where we ought to be yet, but I think the issue of gender-based violence or of access to people's bodies is one that goes even beyond those sort of familial duties, and it seems even like people in their relationships with partners, although premarital and although not allowed in Islam per se, but they happen, right? People do date, people go on dates with people and so they don't even know well and so on. And even in those circumstances, girls have to stand their ground to say, "Excuse me, this is not acceptable." And there's something fundamentally wrong with what the guy goes into those things expecting. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything we can do to change that aspect, at least for now.
Yeah, look, I think that's a really interesting conversation, and maybe a part of the problem, and this is just a very small part of it, and I think that I think the best thing that could actually happen is that we're starting to call this out. right? That we're starting to go, and and there are people on Twitter who've been abused who are starting to go, "You are the person who's done this to me." And obviously, there are a whole lot of reputation. I mean, people can claim, and a lot of men do claim that, oh, it was unfair, or the fact that you're calling this out on social media is unfair, whatever. But I think that's possibly one of the only reasons why people would be likely to stop their behavior, or why men would be likely to kind of watch themselves before they do something which they shouldn't be doing, right? So we've had, for example, we've had this men are trash movement for how long now? It's been years. It's been since what, first, second year, 4, 5 years, 6 years down the line. And we're kind of still having these conversations. And it's only now that it's being really called out, that we're saying, well, you were the person who's done this to me, and attaching a name to it. That people are beginning to go, maybe I should change my reputation. I also think that the fact that we've kept this so undercover perpetuates it, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's true, because I mean, if there's no consequences, you're going to carry on, and it's almost like there are people that think this is normal and will do it, and there are those that don't. And I don't know how to get those who think that it's normal not to think it's normal anymore. That's the issue, you know. It doesn't appear as obvious to everybody, and then again, people aren't having conversations that are open in terms of understanding where the line starts and where the line stops. Um, and you can't tell people stop engaging with one another, stop going to school, stop going out, stop leaving the home, because that's not practical either. So, another argument is no, the victim needs to be strengthened. We need to strengthen women and children physically. But the issue is then, yes, that's fine, but then it doesn't go far enough. They're not going to have protection. Isn't the issue? The issue is that the violence exists from perpetrators, be they men, be the victims men or women themselves also. Um, but yeah, I'm really looking to have Nuran's opinion on this. But of course, we have some network issues. We're also meant to be speaking soon to a lady named Shiam Aziz, who has been a victim and survivor of sexual assault, and is going to speak to us, and perhaps by doing that we can understand a bit better the psychology around this and what actually happens, what actually takes takes place when somebody goes through this. But we're going to take a short break now, and hopefully get all the network stuff in order as well. Don't run away. If you're watching on Facebook, or if you're listening to us, wherever you are, do not run away. Wait for us. We'll be back to lift the silence on sexual assault with Jan Osman and Shiam Aziz. Please don't go away. We'll be back after the break.
And we are back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh once again, and welcome to another rather somber ShaqAttack show. And we're hopefully going to be chatting to Nuran again. But and hopefully we can sort out the technical difficulties. Nuran, are you back with us?
I am. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Fantastic. All right, so Shakil, I think you had a question. I'm not sure if you can remember it, but I'll let you kick off.
Okay, look, we have 20 minutes, and we'd like to speak to Shiham Aziz as well, a survivor of sexual assault. But before we do that, I'd like to just ask you, Nuran, what happens now? People have come out, they've said what they've said. Others have remained silent, and we respect them for doing so. If they're not ready to speak up, for some people, it was the first time they mentioned this online. Others, it was the first time they mentioned it ever, meaning that even people that they live with at home do not know what has taken place. And obviously, this has been a catalyst for them to self-reflect and go out there and discuss it. Although in most parts, the perpetrators have walked off scot-free. Some are strangers that they encountered at malls or even clubs, wherever they were. Even in Islamic settings, people have been abused in fully clothed hijab and so on, or boys for that matter by their ustads and so on. So what happens next? What can we do now to empower those people to heal from that, but also to prevent this from happening again, and to prevent this from being such a widespread issue in our societies? And that before we bring in Shiham Aziz.
I think, Shakil, it's a really good question you ask, and so necessary at this time. One of the first things that I feel should happen is that we should create safe spaces for victims to really speak. No judgments, no protecting of uncles and fathers and stepfathers and cousins and all of that. Just allowing people to speak is the first step with no judgment. The second step is that we need to offer support. So one of the things that we like to ask clients is, what would you like to do about it? So a lot of people are like, oh yeah, let's go and press a charge. Sometimes clients are not ready to take legal action because the process can be quite daunting. And if we are forcing our views down clients' throats, then we are secondary victimizing clients. So secondary victimization takes place and she has trauma again. So it's really important to ask, the first question must be, would you like to talk to me about it? And I'm here, I'm listening, I can hold you through the process. Second question is, what would you like us to do about it, if anything? And follow through. A lot of young people get really disappointed because people promise to take them to the police station, the Tutuzela centers, laying charges, doing the right thing, and then they don't follow through. Often also, I think we discourage clients or beneficiaries or victims to lay charges or to do something about it. We say, oh no, Uncle so-and-so will go to jail for 20 years and we'll feed his family. It's not up to us to decide. The victim has every right to decide what it is that she needs from us or he needs from us, and we need to follow through with whatever. Now, this can be a terribly daunting task because sometimes the perpetrator is someone you know and love. And then what? But I think we must remain just and we must remain kind, compassionate, and caring. And often with my staff, the conversation will often be, what would we do if it were our child? What would we do if it were us? And that needs to happen. But I think another aspect that needs to happen urgently is education and training of parents, and education of training of religious leaders, madrasa teachers, ulama, because often the first point of call when sexual violence, sexual assault, abuse has taken place is the mosque. People go to the imam and talk about it. I've heard a story from one of our clients where she went to an imam to talk about how she had been violated, and he proposed to her and asked to marry her. Now, it's rather inappropriate to be talking to her about marriage at that point. For goodness sake, she's been violated, she's traumatized, she needs you to hold space for her. One of the things we like to do at the ShaqAttack Shelter is we employ both male and female staff so that our clients, our beneficiaries and the children can have positive male role modeling, because this is really, really important. But also positive female role modeling. We've got a youth development academy where boy children have come out and said to me, I need to talk to you. This and this happened when I was a child. And again, there we say, would you like to speak to me as a female, or would you like to speak to a male? And just creating enough security enough, stability enough, empathy, love, and compassion to let the victim know that they are safe. And please, one of the first things that must happen is don't run off and tell the perpetrator. Really, it's not your place. You need often, if the victim grants you permission to speak to the perpetrator, that's something else. But often we want to run off and go and ask the uncle if he really did so. And that's not okay. That's just not okay.
And of course, there could be consequences for that are immediate for the victim, him or herself, that can lead to further harms if not treated with kid gloves in that moment in time. But we have some comments. I'm going to read them. So somebody said, "What do we do once it's called out? We have seen the same trends happening a few months ago when people came out and spoke. But what has changed? Do we start hosting workshops on how to be a good person?" Then another person said, "It's taboo to speak of anything sexual in our community. The higher your social status, your social status, the more it's under wraps. Abuse breeds abuse. We have to break the cycle, which is very difficult if one doesn't accept it as a problem." So that's just two comments from our listeners. On Twitter, I also asked, I put a poll out to say, uh, after reflecting on this week's exposure of sexual assault by victims and in some cases perpetrators being brought to book, what have your thoughts been? 42 people took place in the poll. 21% says they feel anxious. 14% said they feel hopeful for the future. 48 are disgusted, and 17 are asking, what can we do next? On another question that I asked, we asked people how are they feeling, and they said it's alarming how many cases involve religious scholars and teachers, and it's shocking to see how many girls have been abused, and yet no men seem to know any abusers. And I think that's true for myself and Akil. We don't know abusers, but so many girls have been, so many victims have been saying this happened, but we don't know who's doing the abusing. And then I'm proud of all the brave survivors. I pray that they heal and find closure. Talk, and more talk. All perpetrators must be exposed, named, shamed, and must face the full might of the law. So I'm going to ask now, Nuran, if it's appropriate for us to speak to Shiam Aziz, a survivor of sexual assault, and she can go into a bit more detail as to what took place if she wants to, but in broader strokes as well, just to speak to us a bit about this issue of sexual assault in our last segment of the show.
Absolutely.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum to you, to Shiam Aziz. Welcome to Salam Media. We appreciate you being here with us this evening as a survivor of sexual assault. I suppose speaking to us a bit about what people can learn from your experience and to empower those who are going through the same thing. So we're not going to interrupt you. We're going to let you speak for a few minutes and then we'll discuss things further, inshallah.
Okay, so assalamualaikum everybody. So I was first sexually assaulted when I was between 7 and 8 years old. It wasn't in the form of rape, but it was in the form of touching and then being told that it's okay because he's my boyfriend. It was I shouldn't tell anybody. It's a secret because he's my boyfriend. He's allowed to touch. He's allowed to do what he wants to. And then it was I never told anybody. I never told my parents. I never told nobody because you know what? It's a perpetrator has this tendency to make you feel that it's okay what they're doing. They're allowed to do it. They are entitled to your body, and they reassure you and make you feel like, you know what, it's fine. So at 7 years old, what do you know? What do you know about standing up for yourself? What do you know about not being okay to be touched like that? So you just carry on. There were times when at night I would bath and you would feel the burning sensation, but I wouldn't say anything because then people would know. My mom would know, something is up, but he's my boyfriend, so it's okay. Then I was at the moment I'm 55, so it was a good couple of years ago. So it wasn't where at school you were taught about, it's your private part. allowed to touch your body. Nobody's allowed to touch you in this area like you do at school now, right? So later on in my life, I was about 26 years old. I was gang raped by a group of 28. It's difficult for me to speak about this, but it's okay. So it was by a group of 28 gangsters who were at war with other gangsters, and I was caught in the middle. So that was a whole other thing. It was terrible, and when it happens, you sort of die. A part of you dies. It just goes away because you fight back at first. You fight back really hard, and you beg them to stop and things like that, but they don't. So after a while, your body just goes numb and you stop feeling anything. And even afterward, you stop feeling anything for a long time, and you start trying to cope with things that you do feel in all sorts of ways, and nothing actually really helps. So a couple of years after that, I had a baby, and the baby wasn't as a result of the rape. I had a baby, and I was in a really difficult position. And as Naran said earlier, I went to a spiritual leader in the community that I was living at, and I explained to him, you know what, I don't have anywhere to go. My son is a couple of days old. Can you please help us? It's very difficult for me. I have no job. I have nothing. And he told me, okay, so how about I make you my second wife? So I'm like, okay. You want to make my second wife? How is that? Yeah. And then I just gave up on everything. Eventually, I ended up at a shelter with my son, and that's when the healing began. The healing from the childhood molestation, from the rape, from all sorts of things, and you know what? Actually, to be honest with you, it doesn't ever go away. You learn to live with it. You carry on. The healing takes very long, very, very long. And even to today, it's very difficult for me. Like, I will watch things on TV, or I will watch a series and things like that will take place, and it triggers old emotions. It triggers things that I had put out of my mind a long time ago, but it never really goes away. And you feel uncomfortable speaking to anybody about it because people judge. So they're like, okay, so you were raped. So what did you do? What did you do to cause the rape? And I'm really, what did I do? So yeah.
No, I think of course, not anything easy for you to be sharing with us this evening on this platform. We do appreciate that you did so. And there's again no compulsion for you to carry on to say anything else if there isn't anything else that you would want to say. But I just hope that if at least this benefits people that have been abused in that way, they're sitting there silently watching, listening, that have told nobody. I hope that this empowers them at least. It's interesting that you mentioned the spiritual leader coming and saying, I'll take you as my second wife, because we do know that one of the grounds for which doing so, to take a second wife, to compete to solve social issues, should women in the community need that. But that isn't obviously the most wise thing to do on the initial stages. Is just marry the person and now everything's gonna be fine. I thought what you were gonna tell me was that you were turned away completely, based on the past experiences. But what we're not addressing is how are these men created, or even women who are abusing other people? How are they created? What informs them to think that such behavior is okay? And we understand that the gangsterism has a whole different element to it. It's about power. It's about proving to people that we can do this and so on. But I'm not sure if that's your scope to speak on. Perhaps you can speak to Nuran as well. But what's your parting advice to people that have been through this now? People that have just this week come out and said something has happened to me. I'd like to speak about it openly. How would you advise them now moving forward when the wounds are just freshly open?
So my advice to anybody who has been molested, raped, or violated in any way, speak up. Speak up, because you know what? Too many perpetrators are getting away with what they're doing. They're getting away with it because they think that the victim thinks that, you know what, nobody's going to listen to me, nobody's going to believe me. So let's rather keep quiet, because you know what? Just now my mom throws me out of the house if I say it's her boyfriend, or if I say it's her husband. But speak up, because you know what? Nobody has a right to your body except you. Nobody.
Okay, I'm not sure if Akil, for you, Shyam.
Yeah, I mean, Shyam, I must be honest. You know, a lot of what you've told me has kind of left me somewhat speechless. And the two things which go through my head are, one, that, you know, thank you for having the courage to come out and speak about this, because I think having that courage means that anyone else who, you know, by you speaking about it, it imparts that same courage to anyone else out there who's gone through something similar, in whatever form that might take. That's the first thing. And I just hope, inshallah, that that's of some help. And the second thing is that, you know, I want to apologize, because I think that you know, that this is firstly, I don't think Shaquille and I could, you know, really do justice to this interview ever. I don't think anyone could. But secondly, I think that we're a part of the failure. We're a part of the system, which, you know, which allowed whatever you had gone through to happen. As men, I think that whatever in whatever way, you know, I think almost all men in some way, shape, or form have been perpetrators of some sort, whether it's psychologically, whether it's believing certain things, whether it's perpetrating those actions, or whether it's just not speaking out about it, not calling things out. And I suppose, yes, I honestly, I suppose that's it. I think it's just an apology from myself, from Shaquille, from I just think that we've, you know, all failed you in some way.
Shyam, really a big shout out to you for speaking to us.
I can't make out anything that you're saying. It's very difficult for me to.
Okay. Look,
yeah, anything.
it seems like we have network issues. I'm not sure if Nuran is with you. We can conclude, for we have 5 minutes left. She can even stand with you or sit separately, doesn't matter. But we just have 5 minutes left to conclude the topic. And it's not a conversation that is over. I think this has only begun, and we should start writing to ulama. We should start writing to teachers, to schools, to families, and make it normal for people to speak up. And if people aren't speaking up, then at least for if discourses happen like this, then at least people can catch second-hand advice, even if it's not directly to them, because ultimately that might inspire them, and that's exactly why I suppose you are speaking to us tonight, Shiam, and we really appreciate that, and it just shows that although you might have knocked on a few doors that didn't help you, ultimately you did end up where the help was, and people need not to give up when they do pursue assistance, and those who know about somebody else being abused should obviously try and avail their assistance as soon as possible. And if you are abusing and if you're listening and you feel that you may have done something, then completely reflect on yourself and stop. Even an iota of these traits and behaviors need to stop right now. And that's to the listeners as well. But we have so much to do in society to pick up where we've left off and really live by the models that we purport to live by, and society we hope to live in, for our own age group and for the future generations as well. But if you could please bring Nuran back on, yeah, so we can conclude, inshallah.
All right,
Yeah,
Shiham.
we just wanted to conclude, Shyam.
Shiham, can you hear us?
Okay, it seems like Shyam can't hear us. But Akil, I think from our side, the question looms as to what next. And we can use this platform, Salam Media can use the platform, Foundation can use the platform to empower voices. You as a listener have the ability to do so as well. And it's all of our fight to fight, whether we are victims, whether we're perpetrators, whether we've had bad thoughts before, whether we would witness something that and did nothing about it. The time is now, and we need to remove all slogans and words that maybe you feel makes you uncomfortable. Whatever it is, just get the work done and put our hands and our mouths together in prayer and action to get the sickness actually removed from our societies. And may we never be complicit in this, and may we never be victims either, inshallah. I'm not sure if there's anything more to say.
Yeah, no, I think that it's the right thing um, that these acts are being called out, and that in a certain number of cases that the people who perpetrated those acts are being called out. I think that it will at least force the behavior to stop. Because if it doesn't mean that, if there isn't going to be any behavioral change from whoever is perpetrating, at least people will have the fear that they'll have their names smeared if they do that. And the second thing is, I hope it gives all of us the time to sit down and to reflect and to think about ways in which we might have made people uncomfortable. I know that over a certain period of time, it's certainly made me question those things. In whatever, and those it could be in very big, overt, obvious ways. It could be in very small ways, and sometimes we don't recognize the kind of violence we're perpetrating on people through the things we do, the things we say, the way we act, whatever that case may be. And so, in closing, I just hope that we all reflect, but I also hope that I hope that all of this comes to something for once. Because we have.
I mean, I think it'll be sad if this was a moment or a trend, and that's it. I think people are being very hard on each other, on their friends, if their names were shamed. So hopefully that will be a deterrent, and that further action will be taken should the victims wish for that to happen. But I'm going to thank Nuran Osman from Ihata Shelter, as well as Shyam Aziz, a victim of sexual assault and rape, for both of their time, for speaking to us. And hopefully to the listeners, this is not the end, but the beginning of a biblical conversation. We need to see change happening, and if it's not being addressed in the madaris near you, the masajid near you, the schools near you, the family discussions near you, then be that person that speaks about it, and hopefully there will be a ripple effect, inshallah. And I think that without any further ado, we'd like to say
Just before we end, and I think, and I'm hoping that there are lots of parents out there. A lot of what allows these sorts of things to happen is that we don't have honest conversations in our households about sex, about sexuality, about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. These conversations are taboo. It's seen as some sort of under the carpet hidden thing, as if it doesn't happen. It's a natural human act. It's part of the reason why the two of us have been, the mechanism by which the two of us have been brought onto this earth. Sex and sexuality are natural and they're normal, and we need to normalize speaking about them in open and honest terms, because I think that gives everyone, men and women, a clear understanding of what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable. And in that conversation, a lot of the conversation is, I think a lot of the fear is that, if you speak about these things openly, you're going to you're going to cause some fitna. People all of a sudden are going to go around and are going to be sexually promiscuous. The fact of the matter is that is absolutely not true, right? So we need to be having these conversations in our households with our kids from an early age, not when they're 16 or 17, because kids start getting up to, that like sexualization happens from 9-10 years old. And we need to be having real, honest, productive conversations around sex and sexuality. Eventually that needs to happen, I mean, in our broader education system. But it hasn't happened in our homes. And a part of the reason why a lot of these things have been allowed to slide is because it hasn't happened in our homes. So if there are parents out there, if there are young kids out, who are listening, do society a favor and do each other a favor. And if you're a young kid, go to your parents and let's try and start a conversation. And if you're a parent, let's have these conversations. Let's have these conversations early, honestly, earnestly, in the spirit of Islam and what is halal and haram, but also in the spirit of helping people understand that this is a normal part of life. And in the same way that we know that murder is wrong, or that we know that stealing is wrong, we should know that certain acts perpetrated by men or women are wrong, and that there's certain ways in which these things should be conducted. And I think not making those conversations taboo is part of the way that we start to create some sort of cognitive shift. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Anyway, with that, we close Akil, food for thought. We thank listeners and those we spoke to earlier, Shyam and Nuran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll be back next week, inshallah. From us at ShaqAttack and Salam Media. Take care and all the best, inshallah.